Hello, and welcome to Ending Physician Overwhelm. I'm your host, Dr. Megan Mello. I'm a family and obesity medicine physician, as well as a certified life coach for physicians. In this podcast, we talk about how the learned habits of people-pleasing, perfectionism, and a lack of boundaries show up in our lives and how they contribute to burnout, exhaustion, and overwhelm. The healthcare system is broken, my friends, but let's not wait for it to be fixed in order to feel better. Hello and welcome to today's episode. I want to talk today about shoulding and how we should all over ourselves and other people. And I come to this today from the perspective of being able to look at shoulding in a different light. This week has really been a test of what I'll call my anti-shoulding muscles, because of the way that I've changed how I think about things. And, if we think about, as we've talked about before, we have thousands and thousands of thoughts. It's estimated we have 40 to 60,000 thoughts a day. And I have to wonder, especially for high achievers, what percentage of those thoughts are about shoulds and should nots, right? Should be this way, shouldn't be that way. I should do this, I shouldn't do that. I really think that would be an interesting study that no one would really want to know the answer for. But let me tell you a little bit about what's been going on. So we got through Labor Day weekend and we were expecting school to start again. And so I was expecting that my two boys would be back in school and, eager to see their friends and, get back into the whole school year routine. And our teachers went on strike. And I get that, burnout and pay and all of the issues. But we had this day where I wasn't scheduled to work. And so I was home with them because, of course, daycare was also not available to us. And, it was kind of this ridiculous day where, okay, they should have been in school, but they weren't. And then they decided that they wanted to go to this particular park. And, it was a nice day. It was nice weather. So we drove over there. And it was closed, right? And it should have been open because they really wanted to play there. And, it just seemed like we just ran into all of these roadblocks. Everything that we sort of planned and talked about, something else happened. And, meanwhile, in the back of my brain, I'm thinking, I should be working. I should be recording the podcast episode. I should be, working on, getting more clients or writing my blog or, doing any number of other tasks. I should. But thankfully, even though those thoughts were coming to me, I wasn't really getting stuck in them the way that I would have for almost all of the years of my life, just because I've gained so much more awareness of, how detrimental those shoulding voices are. And so I want to talk today a little bit about, this concept where we are often constantly shoulding on ourselves and, sort of how that started and what we can do about it. And so we're going to talk about three sort of different areas. And the first I want to cover is that, again, during our training, we got really good because this idea of should or should not was really ingrained in us. And, when we think about sort of how does one learn medicine, we really spend a lot of time on pattern recognition, right? And we are aware of that. We are trying to recognize patterns of symptoms that might relate to a disease or to an organ. And, patterns of behaviors in humans that might suggest this thing or that. And, we should behave in this way and we shouldn't behave in those ways. And, we should do these elements of the exam and, we shouldn't do that in that condition, and should and shouldn't. And you think about how many times you might have been presenting to an attending, and you're a student or a resident, and you might hear, well, you should really think about, or, well, you shouldn't have done that. And it really just became so much a part of our existence of should and should not. And I think about how it almost felt like we were navigating this tunnel, and actually made me think about Luke Skywalker in A New Hope, the original Star Wars movie, which is episode 4 for other Star Wars nerds out there, where he is in his X-Wing fighter and he's navigating the trench to try and, I don't remember what they were called, proton torpedoes, in to blow up the Death Star, right? And so he's in this very narrow trench, and he's trying not to bounce off the walls, right? He's trying to stay in the trench without crashing, and meanwhile, Darth Vader and the other TIE fighters are, blasting at him. And it sort of felt like that, in sort of navigating between, these two walls. One wall is we should do this, and the other wall is I shouldn't do that. And, it just felt like this very sort of treacherous, dangerous path to, make sure that we, take care of the patient, that we, land our proton torpedoes in, and, we get the diagnosis and treat and blah, 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 blah. So, I just want to use that as a very nerdy example of this part of our training that really heightened these should and should not judgments that we have. And just to say that if you find yourself also as someone who is constantly sort of, navigating that should, shouldn't, and just really in a state of sort of judgment all the time, that it makes sense, that you are, stuck in that way, simply because that is a very common part of our training. The next area that I want to really highlight about, the shoulding habit is that it really is us, and I've talked about this before, it really is us resisting what is, right? And when we're resisting what is, then we are not being present. So, in my sort of normal mode of being, I would be very much stewing over the fact that my kids should be in school, and they're not. And the park that they wanted to go to should be open, and it's not. That I should be able to do this thing with them, and I can't. And that I should be working, that I should be, getting stuff that I had on my calendar to get done today. I should be able to do that, and I can't. And, so often when we are doing this, whether we're aware of it or not, we are really unable to see the situation as it is, right? We are in resistance to the fact that school is not open, right? That the teachers are on strike. And yes, that park is closed because they're doing some maintenance work. And, I thought that they would be in school and that I would have the time to be able to do, the tasks that I had scheduled, but they aren't in school and I can't, or I can't do it in the way that I had planned to do it. So when we're spending, this energy in resistance, we aren't seeing, kind of the facts as they are on the ground. Or if we're seeing them, we're spending so much time sort of judging them that we really just aren't able to appreciate the situation as it is. As it so happened on that day when they should have been in school and we should have been at this other park, but ended up, horror of horrors, at the other park that they like to go to, we actually had a great time. And how cool was this? They got to see a real DeLorean car, like the Time Machine in Back to the Future, which of course they haven't seen, but here I am also revealing my nerd side. I was just geeking out over, and the owner happened to be standing right by his car, and he opened up the gull wing doors, and it was really cool. So we got to have this really neat unusual experience, even though we weren't supposed to be there for many reasons. And I was supposed to be working. But it'll stand out as this fun time. And I was glad that I was able to be present for it. Because I was able to be present for it, I was able to go up to the owner and confirm that he was the owner and ask if we could take a picture of the car, right? And so now we have this picture and this fun memory. And that's just a very tiny, very sort of simple, ridiculous example. But so much of the little moments of joy and happiness that we experience in our life are made up of these little tiny moments. And so when we're spending a lot of time in resistance to what the actual reality of the situation is, we miss those little moments, right? It would have been very easy for us to walk right past this car, or for us to all, be upset and grumpy and just not appreciating the fact that we got to spend a really nice day outside at a park that they do enjoy, even though it wasn't their first pick, and to see this really cool car. That also relates to the third thing that I want to talk about, which is how much energy are we actually spending stuck in resistance? When we are constantly walking through our day, resisting what is because it should or should not be that way. The patient should be on time. The symptoms should be more clear, or it shouldn't include this. Or, again, any number of other circumstances. They shouldn't have said that. They should do that. They shouldn't do that. When we're in these constant states of shoulding, including shoulding on ourselves, we are spending so much mental energy in that resistance that we are actually depleting ourselves. We are depleting our reserves. And this happens very naturally for many of us. It happens very automatically for many of us, but that doesn't mean that it's a permanent state. If we can learn to stop pouring so much energy into, what should or shouldn't be, then we can actually be more present, for what actually is, but we actually also get that mental energy back, which helps us to be able to handle whatever the situation is, right? If I was spending a lot of mental energy being very upset about the fact that I couldn't work in the way that I wanted, that they should be in school, but they weren't, and all the shouldn't, then, I wouldn't actually have had the problem solving ability to say, okay, well, plan A didn't work, so let's do plan B, and, kind of move through our day. And again, that's a very simple example, but so often we are presented with, these challenges that come up where things don't go as planned, where, we think that this thing is going to happen, but this other thing is going to happen. Look at the pandemic itself, right? I remember when we were first talking about it, when our schools first, were trying to decide how they were going to navigate this terrible sounding virus in March of 2020, their plan was that we're going to close the school for 2 weeks, right? And that, that was them sort of in their best judgment of trying to figure out how to deal with the problem. But, again, if we're spending so much time saying, well, this should be happening or this shouldn't be happening, then we don't have the emotional bandwidth to be able to deal with the situation as is. I think, the whole world was kind of so blitzed and caught up in the severity and the virulence, if you will, of this virus, right? And how quickly it had such devastating effects that, we weren't able to really initially really think about it from the perspective of, hey, when pandemics happen, they often last for several years. I don't think we had those thoughts, or at least most of us didn't early on in the pandemic. We were thinking, okay, well, this is going to be a short-term thing. And, and then so many of us have been in resistance about how long it has taken, right? And we've seen the toll of that with, masking and all sorts of political situations. So I won't keep going down that rabbit hole. But just to say that when we can stop donating our mental energy to the should and the shouldn't, right? And to really resisting things as they are, then we are much better able to, sort of deal with whatever's in front of us, whatever challenge is in front of us. We can just navigate it with that much more intention and energy. So I want to invite you, if you're feeling like you are also someone who is in this pattern of shooting on yourself constantly, and often that goes along with shooting on other people, and sort of carrying all these judgments around with you, I really invite you to start questioning, those shoulds and shouldn'ts. Is it really true that this thing should or shouldn't be happening? And is it helpful for you to keep thinking that, right? I can see by the calendar that my children are supposed to be in school, and they're not because something else happened, right? A teacher strike has happened. But I don't need to keep saying, well, it shouldn't be happening. Instead, I need to use those resources to be able to figure out, day to day as we see how the strike unfolds. Okay, well, how am I going to deal with, the issue of childcare this week? And, on this day when, I have these things scheduled and I'm supposed to, be in the clinic at this time, how am I going to navigate that? Rather than spending that energy in resistance, angry, saying, how dare they about whatever the situation is, right? I want to be able to really focus on the problem solving rather than getting stuck in resistance. And just imagine, if you will, for a moment, what this does for you in your life, right? If you stop shoulding, if you stop thinking that, this person should behave this way and I should or should not do that thing, and it should be this thing is happening and it's not. If we stop donating our energy, how much more bandwidth do we have? And maybe not immediately, but the effects are really cumulative here. Wouldn't you love to have more bandwidth, more resources, more energy to be able to deal with the challenges that always pop up? Because the truth is there's so much uncertainty. And sometimes we think that things are certain, right? The first day of school is planned for this date. Or, a global pandemic shouldn't be happening, right? We think it's so certain that we've got this, that we've got control. And really, truly, we don't have that much control. But what we do control, or at least can learn to control, is how we choose to think about situations, how we choose to let go of behaviors like shoulding, how we choose to use our mental and emotional resources in order to be able to better navigate the challenges, right? That is really something that most of us would like more of, right? The ability to better navigate the natural challenges that occur in our life, whether that's, in our professional work or at home. There's so much that we don't control, but we want to be able to cope with it, to be able to be aware of our emotions, to be able to have the bandwidth to deal with it, to regroup, to be able to move forward. All right, my friends, that is what I have for you. I hope that you found this helpful, and wish us luck in terms of getting back to school. It will happen eventually. I just don't know when. And until then, I'm going to choose not to listen to those shoulds and shouldn'ts in my head and just keep doing the best I can as the days come. And I hope you'll choose to start doing the same. All right, take care. Have a great week, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.
Well, That's our show for today. Thank you as always for listening. To learn more about my coaching programs, head to www.healthierforgood.com. And if you love this podcast, please drop us a review on iTunes or support the show by clicking the link in the show notes. Until next time, take care.